Yayo Arellano. I'm Mexican. My Chinese name is Yayo, as you can see here. So I am a mobile developer. I was using Android. I was using Kotlin and Swift in my former company, but it was so slow. So I decided to try Flutter to speed up the development. And then I realized it's a very good framework. So now I use Flutter for everything. If you have any question, just write here in the chat. You can write in English because it's hard for me to understand Chinese. So, okay, let's start. What are we going to do? Okay, I will show the app that we are going to do. Is this app that we have here. Also, I'm going to show some mistake that I've seen a lot when people is coding Flutter. Then we are going to define the architecture of this app that we are going to make, and then we are going to start coding. So, any questions so far? Is my English clear?
English is fine.
Great. Okay. So let me show you the app first, then. I have it here already. So we are going to do this app. It's very simple. It's just we call one API, one REST API. We fetch the news. We show them here in this list. And when we click, we open the website of this news. So the REST API that we are going to use is from this website, News API. So we can see when we fetch, okay, this is the endpoint. When we fetch one endpoint, is return a JSON. The JSON will have the status, the articles, and some information about the news. So, okay, let's start. And we are going to use this. If you want to try by yourself, you can get an API key here. You need to log in, and then you will get one API key. Okay, so the first thing I want to show is some mistakes that people do. So for that, I already prepared some code that we are going to check. And let me see, where is it? Okay, I use Android Studio. I know many people use Visual Code. It's fine, both can be used. So, okay, here right now, I have the news API. Is exactly this one that I just showed. Let me show again. Okay, the code that I have here is this one that I have here. So the mistake I see a lot when that people do is you have some widgets, but here is when you call the API. Let's see this news source that I have here, or this is where I call the API. So okay, you can see I have my API key, I have the URL, the endpoint that I will call. But you can see these are static fields. For example, this HTTP client is static. This API top headlines is static. So what will happen is from my main or for my widgets, from my user interface, I call, you can see here I'm using a future builder. So I call this API and then, okay, I get the results. The problem, I can share the repo and the code later. Okay, the problem with this approach is you cannot test this code, right? If I try to mock this new source, how can I put that mock inside, I don't know, inside this future? So this code is very hard to unit test or widget test. And some people say, okay, I'm doing this first, and I will call my API from the user interface, and later I'm going to change. Okay, it's just, I would say, it's a bad practice. So you can see in this example that I have here, I just have the class that will call the API. Also, I have one model that is the article. This article, if we look the JSON that is in the documentation. So we will see that the class that I call article is just a representation of this JSON into this class. Also here, I have my widgets. So only we didn't separate in different layers, right? We have everything together. So this is very hard to test. And I did this mistake myself many times. Okay, so how can we fix the code from before? So we need to define an architecture, right? So for the app that we are going to make today, we are going to define 3 different layers. The first one is the data layer. Here we will have a class that we will call news source. This will connect directly to the API. We will fetch the news. Then we have another class here I call news repository. The job of this class is when you have different data sources, for example, you have the local database and you fetch the data from the local source or the remote source, then here you can combine and you decide which one you send to your, in this case, we are using Bloc. So which information or which data you want to send to the Bloc. In this case, we will use Cubit. And then, okay, we have the presentation layer where we only show widgets. So far, any question about this? Remember, you can type your question in the chat. Okay, for this app, we are not going to do this part that is in red because then it will take a lot of time. So this red thing, we are not going to do. We are just going to do the new source. Then we are going to test this class. We are add some unit tests. We are going to do the repository. We are going to add the Cubit. We are going to test the Cubit and also the widgets, and we are going to do some widget tests. Okay, if there is no questions, then I will close this. And give me 1 second. I will bring this here. Okay, here I already defined some things. The first thing is I already add the package that we will use. We will use GetIt to do injection, dependency injection, HTTP to call the APIs, Flutter Bloc to keep the state. This equatable we use to compare different objects. This to open the external website when we click the news. Also, we use this to cache the image. And also we use some dependencies, developer dependencies. We use Bloc test to test the Bloc, Mockito to create mocks. So, okay, let's let's start working from this class. Usually, many people, you like to start creating the widgets because you want to see how the user interface look. But in this session, we are going to start with the news, well, with the lower layer, that is the data layer. So we are going to start coding this part. So I will go here. I already create some directories. So you will see I create Bloc, data source, dependency injection, some models, repository. So here in the data source, I don't have anything yet. Also, I have here a class that I call response, API response. I want to explain what is this class doing. So for that, I will open Postman. This is the API that we are going to call. New API, news API.org top headlines. So here you can see the response. We have always the status. We have the number of results and the articles. And you can see articles is an array. And then I can see every single article. So this API response is basically this thing. We have here status. Here we have status. It's a string. We have, as you can see here in this, in Postman, I don't have code. I will explain what is code later. We have the articles that are articles. And this code is an error code. If, for example, I change the API, the API key, now you can see that I have code and I have message. So again, we have status, we have code, and we have, okay, we don't have message. I didn't put it here. We are not going to use. So, okay, I send it back. So this class that we have here is just to convert this JSON to this class object. Then here in the new data source, what we are going to do is, okay, let's start coding. I am not going to code line by line. I'm going to copy and paste the code that I already have ready, and I will try to explain what the code do. So we are going to create an HTTP client. So I put it here. I need to add the import. As you can see, I pass the HTTP client as in the constructor. This is not static. I do like this because then later I can pass a mock and then I can unit test. Yeah, I can unit test this class. Then I will create the function, one function that will help me to call the API. So I will create this function here. As you can see, we return the API response. That is this class that I already explained. So I do the import. Then, okay, I create the URI. I call the API. This response I convert to the type API response. For this, we use JSON decode. Then here I will have the result. The result can be successful or can be an error. So we can check what kind of result do we have. So if it's an error, we need to do something here. I will put here to do. If it's not error, then we just return the result. So again, when can we have an error and why here I put status equals error? Remember what I say, if I change something here, then I get status equal error and I get a code. And for example, this one is API key invalid. So this error that we are going to handle here, somehow we need to pass to the presentation layer so we can show the error in the presentation layer. So we are going to define some custom exceptions. So when I can throw the error here or the exception here, and I can handle in the presentation layer. So for that, it's very easy. I will copy and paste the errors. I will put it down here. So we will have two kind of error. Right now we are only going to handle these two types of error when we are missing the API key or when the API key is invalid. So usually if you want to handle every single error, you will go to the documentation and here you can find, for example, here we have errors. So we know when, for example, there is API key missing or API key invalid, or you can see all the errors that you can get. In this case, we are only going to handle these two. Because if I try to handle everything, then this presentation will go, we will never finish. So what I'm going to do here is check the code. If the code is API key missing, then I throw the missing API key exception. If the API key is invalid, then I throw API key invalid exception. If I don't handle the error, but I just throw an exception, and maybe in the user interface I show that we don't know what kind of error we have. So this is a helper function, right? We still need to call this endpoint that we have here. So for that, I will create a function that I will call top headlines. And this will return a list of articles. We call that endpoint top headlines. We pass some parameters, the country and the API key. And then we will return this, a future of list articles. So right now this class should be working. I mean, if I call this function, I should get a response, a list of what's the name of news, of articles. So far, any question? Remember, you can type in the channel, in the message box. I can read. Okay, if there is no, I have here an error. Okay, if there is no questions about this class, before I code this, let's do some unit testing in this class. So we can see if it's true or not that this class is working. For that, I already prepared some files. I prepared the JSON response when the API key is invalid. So we will get this from the API. I prepare when the API key is missing. So we will get this error from the API. And also I prepare a JSON when the response is success. So we will get this kind of response. Also, I create here a file that we are going to use for this testing. So let me see. For testing the data source, the first thing I need to do is, if you remember the new source, we need to pass a mock HTTP client. So I need to create a mock client so I can create my new source, and this source can read these files that I already create, these JSON responses. So for that, here I will use this code. And give me 1 second, I will explain. Okay, I'm missing the imports. Okay, this code, what we are going to do is we are going to pass the file path. In this case, it can be any of these 3 JSONs. Then with this file path, we create our new source. Remember, the new source is the one that we just code. And at this new source, we are going to pass a mock client. This mock client will have the API response will be 200. It will have the information or the data from these JSONs. And then we can use this data source to test. So let's say we want to test if the response is correct. So I create a unit test to test top headlines response is correct. Let me see. I'm missing here. Okay, for this test, we are going to use this file, top headlines JSON. Remember, this is a response, a success response, correct, that has 2 results. You can see that we have an article 1 here and article 2 here. So I will call this function data source get data source. This will be new source. Okay, so I create my new source and I get I pass the JSON file. And then from this new source, I need to call this function that I have here so I can test the result. So, okay, coming back, I call this new source top headlines. I await, and then these articles, we should have, or we expect that there should be 2 articles. The first one, the author is this person, and the second one is this person. So let's see again this, that here we have our results. There are 2. The first author is this, and the second one is this. So let's run this test and let's see if it's true or not. Okay, we can see there is one test success. How do I know if this is true, what I'm saying? Okay, usually, maybe I can delete this one. So instead of having 2 results, we will have 1. I run the test again, and this test should fail. Okay, we can see the test fail. Any question in this test? Okay, I go back. Now I want to test if, let me see. Let's test if we can handle these exceptions correctly. So first we are going to test if we handle correctly the missing API exception. So I go back to my test. Now I'm going to create the test here. Okay, here we can see this test is API key missing exception. So again, I will copy this code that I have here. I will call this new source and this get data source. So you can see here I'm passing the JSON missing exception JSON. So when I call the function top headlines, it should throw an exception. So I expect that when I call top headlines, it would throw an exception that is missing a key exception. So now let's run this test again. And I should have 2 success tests. Okay, we can see 2 success tests. Finally, I want to test if the API key is invalid. So I will just create this test. I did it fast. So here you can see I pass in the API key invalid JSON, and I'm also checking if my class throw the API key invalid exception. So these 2 exceptions are different. So let's try. Let's see what happened. I should have 3 test success. Okay, 3 success tests. So with this, we already complete this new source. Any question so far? We already do this class. We already unit test this class. If not, if there is no questions, let's move on to create this news repository. This one is going to be very fast. Okay, here I already create the 2 classes. 2 files that I call news repository and news repository. Let's see what is each one doing. The first one I will call news repository. I just will call it like this, news repository. You can see this is an abstract class. So this function doesn't have any implementation. It's just a function that like this. Later on, I will explain why we need or why I do like this. Okay, so this is the news repository. then we need to create the implementation of this news repository. So that's why I will copy this code. That's why I create here another file. This one I will call class news repository imp from implementation that extends news repository. Then here it will ask me to override this function. I can add the override. And here, what it say here? Okay, here we need to return something. So as you can see, we override the news repository. We create this implementation, and here what we need to do is to code this new source. But how are we going to code this new source from the repository? So there is different ways, right? So maybe I can create here a final new source equals new source. And I can return here new source top headlines. This is one way we can create this implementation. But the problem, if we do like this, is that we are going to create a dependency of this class with the repository. Then we are not going to be able to unit test this class. So for that, to fix that problem, we are going to use dependency injection. So for that, I already create, for dependency injection, we are going to use this package that is GetIt. It's not getX. GetX is something else. This is GetIt. Let me see. Okay, this one. So we are going to use this for dependency injection. This is not getX. So let's see, how does it work? So I create here a folder I call dependency injection. Let's create a class that I will call dependency injection. And here I'm going to create an instance of GetIt. This is a global. And I need to add the imports. So here I'm going to create a function to inject the dependencies. Also, this is a global function. And I'm going to inject the data source, the one that we just create. So here I put data source, and here's data source like this. I inject the new source. So in my repository, I can have access to that source like this. I use GetIt, get. And here I would say this is of the type news source. So now that we use this dependency injection, later when we are unit testing, instead of injecting news source, we can inject a mock news source. So we can test whatever we want to test. So the repository is ready. We don't need to do anything else here. Any question about this repository? Again, remember, you can type your question. I will try to answer. Okay, if there is no question, we are not going to test the repository because right now it's just one line and there is no logic. We just code the top headlines. But later on, I will explain why we create one abstract class for this repository and one implementation. So let's see what we need to do now. We already have this news source. We have the news repository. Now we need to do this part. In this part, we are going to use the package Flutter Bloc as state management package. So let's do this news Cubit. So for that, I already create here a class and I call here news Cubit. And the first thing we need to do is create some states. So the initial states will be like this. It's also an abstract class, new state. Then, okay, this is the parent state. The initial state is just like this, new state, initial state. We don't have anything here. We also have a loading state. The loading state will happen when we are calling the API. We are going to show some kind of loading in the user interface. Also, we have a state when when we already complete the loading. So when we already complete the loading, it means we already call the API, we get the result. So we have the list of news with us. So let's add some code here. In this complete state, we will have a list of news. So we initialize in the constructor. And we override these props. These props come from the package equatable. And then we have another state. This will be the state when there is an error. So I will call this error state. And here what we are going to have is a message. So I will put like this, we have a message. So this message we are going to show in the user interface. So now here above, I can create my class, my Cubit. Remember, we are using the package Flutter Bloc, but Flutter Bloc package has something that they call Cubit. I need to add the import. So here we are going to have a repository. Let's see again the architecture. We can see the Cubit will call the repository. So again, we need to do dependency injection. So I will go to my dependency injection file and I will inject the repository. So for that, we do like this. Here is news repository, and here is news like this. Then here in the Cubit, I can get the repository just like this. News repository. Something that I want you to notice, this is very important, is you can see here when I pass the injection, I say this is a news repository, but I am injecting a news repository implementation. So in my Cubit, I'm getting the news repository, But because here I inject the implementation using GetIt, actually I'm using the implementation. Okay, let's continue. The new Cubit need a constructor, and we need to call the super constructor, and we pass the initial state. Then I will create here a function that I will call load top news. The default country will be Taiwan or TW. Then here, the first thing, what happened? Let me see why. The first thing that we do when we are going to call this function is emit the loading state. In this moment, in the user interface, we are going to show some kind of loading, something that is loading. Then we are going to call the API. Then if everything is correct, we will get a list of news, and we can call load complete state. Then we can show in the user interface the list of news. But if you remember, here in the news source, sometimes we are going to throw an exception, like when the API key is invalid or something like that. So we need, in this place, we need to handle those exceptions. So I will put a try here, also a catch. Then I can check what kind of exception we have. If it's a missing API key exception, then I can show this kind of error. Please check the API key. If the exception is API key invalid, then I can say here the API key is incorrect. If there is any other kind of error, then we just can say that we don't know what kind of error we have. So now you can see we can show the loading state, we can show the complete state, and also we can handle the errors, the exceptions from the API. So with this Cubit class is complete. Of course, this can be done better. This can be do shorter, but if you read the Flutter blog documentation is like this, so that's why I did it like this. Any question, anyone? Is my English clear? My English is not my mother language, so that's why I'm asking.
English
Okay,
is
everything is nice. Let's
nice.
unit test this Cubit. So I will create here a new file that I will call new Cubit test. And here we are going to, let's see what we need to do. Okay, to unit test the Cubit, I'm going to create a mock of this repository so we can get we can mock the responses from the repository, and then we can unit test this. So for that, to create the mocks, there is two ways that it can be done. Right now we are going to use Mockito, but there is many different ways. In this way, we are going to use Mockito. So let's go back here. So Mockito in the documentation, it says need to add this tag to create the mock. So here we are going to mock the news repository. And I need to add the imports. Again, I want you to see I'm mocking the abstract class. If I go inside, this is the abstract class. It doesn't have any implementation. Then we need to run the code generation command. In this case, will be Flutter pub run builder. So, okay, I will run this command I already have here. So this is just a script that I create that will set Flutter to 10.3, clean, then upgrade, then run this command. So this builder will create the mock that I need. So we wait a few seconds. So this is the thing that we are going to use for testing, Mockito. And okay, we are doing like this, generate mocks. We say which mock we want to generate, and we are running the builder. So because we are waiting, there is time for questions. I cannot hear someone say something. I didn't hear it. My computer is old, so that's why it's very slow. No, I didn't eat. No, I didn't eat yet. But I drink this Luisa coffee. Okay, succeed. Let's keep going. We are doing the test. Now you can see there is a new file here, the one that was generated. So we can create, let's see, here I'm going to create mock news repository mock rep. Okay, now I have this new class that is, the name is mock news repository. So basically is this, but now it's a mock. And in the setup, we need to do this setup, and I need to add some package here. Okay, in the setup, we are going to remove anything that is already injected in GetIt. We are also going to create this mock repo, and we are going to inject mock repo here, and this is mock repository. So you can see every time we do a unit test, we are going to do this function. We are going to create a mock repo, and we are going to inject. Then let's create our first test. So the first test, let me see. We want to check. Give me 1 second. Okay, in the first test, we want to check if the news were loaded correctly. So okay, I put here my Bloc test. We are going to test if the news were loaded correctly. So we need to create a widget. So I will need to override this view. And here I'm going to return, we need to create the Cubit. So here I'm going to return this Cubit. And then, let me see. Okay, so far we are good. Then also I need to call the act. In this act, we are going to call the API load.news. And when we load top news, what is the expectation that we want? Sorry, it's not that. We expect to have two states, right? The first state will be loading and then complete. So let's say when we call load top news, we will have loading state and then we will have complete state. So that's what we are expecting. And then in the complete state, remember we need to pass something, a news here. So I'm going to create here up an article. I will call, where can I, okay, I will put it here. I will put this article here. So, okay, let's see what is going to happen. I will go to the architecture. This news Cubit will call the repository, but the repository is a mock. So we will return one article, one list of articles. So we need to tell the mock which article we want to return. We want to return this article that I have here. So to do that, we put here in the build, when I call mock repo, the top headlines, no matter what I send, I want to respond an article, a list of articles that will be this one. So if I run this test, it should be a successful test. If the test fail, then I don't know what we did wrong. Well, it will not fail. I'm pretty sure it will pass. Okay, we can see there is a successful test. Let's say the API return two articles. I will call this number 2 and 2, and here 1, 2. So when I call this API top headlines, it will return two articles. And this unit test will fail because we are not testing for two articles, we're just testing for one. Okay, we can see this test fail. So let's go back. I just want to test for one. Okay, we are testing the successful. Let's say now we want to test if there is an exception. For example, API key invalid exception. I'm going to copy and paste this test. And we are just going to change the code. So for this test, I want to test when the API key is invalid. So when I call the API top headlines, then I'm going to throw an exception. Instead of here return an article, I throw the API key invalid exception. Then I return this Cubit. Then I call log news. Then I will have loading state. But then I will have here another state that will be one error state, news error state. And I will have a message that the message when we have API key invalid exception will be, let me see, this one. So I will copy this and I put here. So I will run the test. I should have two successful tests. Okay, now we have two tests that are successful. Let's say I code the API and instead of throwing invalid exception, just throw an exception. And this second test have to fail. And we see, okay, one test pass, one test fail. Why? Because we are testing if the API key is not valid. Okay. So now this should work correctly. So right now, we already did this news Cubit. We already do this news repository and this news source, and we unit test this. So far, does anyone has any question? If not, let's move on. Now we are going to do the thing that is the most fun, is we are going to do the user interface. And is the thing also is, yeah, well, it's the most fun. Okay, let me see how can we start. I will go to the main. The first thing I will do in the main is I need to inject the dependencies. So I will put here and inject dependencies. So the first thing when I open this app is we inject the dependencies. So is this code here. And let's run the app right now. Let's see what happened. So I'm going to run this main. Let's wait maybe 1 minute. So you have 1 minute for questions. Okay, again, I say my computer is a little slow. Maybe we need to wait 2 minutes. Okay, it's ready. We can see we have this hello world, that is this hello world that we have here. So it's what we were expecting. Then what I'm going to do is I will create here a widget, stateless widget I will call top news. I'm going to override the build. And the first thing I need to do is I'm going to call the API. So remember, from the user interface, we are going to call the Cubit, and then the Cubit the repo, and then the new source, and then until here, right? So we need to use a block provider. So this will be something like this, block provider. Then I create the news Cubit, and I call the load news. Here I will have a child that right now we just put a container. And then do this. Okay, so we create this block provider. When we create this Cubit, we call the load top news. Here we will have a scaffold. We have an app bar with the title of news. And then here above, now I'm going to pass this top news. Now it's not a text view. And I will refresh the UI. Let's see. Okay, now we have top news and we have nothing here. Then we need to use a block builder to build the user interface. So here in the body, I will pass a block builder like this. And here I need to override this builder. So the state, remember we have different states. Here I just will return a center, a circular progress bar. This one. And now we have this. So let's check which states we can have. We can have the state that is new load complete. And in this state, we are going to return a list of, or we are going to show a list of news. When the state is error, we are going to return just a text with the error, with the message. And when there is any other state, it means loading. If it's not error, if it's not complete, then it's loading. So right now, let's see if the error states work correctly. So I will go to my news source. And let's say I put here some like this. So now the API should be not correct. Let me refresh. Yeah, this API key should be wrong. So we should get that state error. So I perform hot restart. And okay, we can see here the error say the API key is incorrect, right? If I put it back correct, and then I do again hot restart, then we are just going to see the loading. But we can fix that. We can go, let's see, return text. Then I will put here classes. And then I will put state dot news dot length. Again, hot restart. Right now we are going to see, okay, there is 20 classes when we call the API. So right now we are doing this. So right now we know when the error state, yeah, is working, we show the error. When it's loading, yes, we show the loading. And now we need to build the user interface to show the classes. So for that, what we are going to do is, let me think. Here we are going to return a list view builder. And then here we have, I think this is the context. And then this is the index. And then we can do this actually there. Here I also need the item count. Item count that will be state.new.length. Here I'm going to put index, which is state news index title. Okay, here we can see, okay, we are showing all the news from this API, but there is no style. So we need to create a more pretty user interface. Any question? If there is no question, let's do a very pretty interface very fast. So here I create another statelet widget. This statelet widget will pass an article. We need to initialize this in the constructor. And then we need to override the build function. And here is where we are going to do all the pretty user interface. Here I'm going to change this return. We are going to return a list item, and we are going to pass the article. That will be like this. So every time we build an item, we call this class here. So let me think, we are going to return a card, and this card will have a child that will be a column. In this column, we have the children. And the first thing we are going to build is the image. So let's put here one pretty good image. So sometimes this API return the image is null. So if it's null, I just put that like a red container. If it's not null, then we are going to show the image like this. So I can refresh right now and we can see some image that are loading, then they are showing. Then I think I want to add some margin here in the card. Then we are going to add the title of the news. So I put the title. I do a refresh. I put some nice style in the title. Then I want to put the description. So I put here the description. Okay, now we have a pretty nice description, but I want to put some spaces. So I put an space, maybe one here. Okay, and one in the bottom also. Okay, now we have a pretty nice interface. And we almost finished. Now when I click here, I want to open the news, the URL of the news. So I will wrap this in a gesture detector. And when I do on tap, then we are going to open this article. Here is launch like this. Okay, let's see if it's true. If I click, now I open this news. I go back. I open this other news. Okay. So, okay, great. We finished this nice user interface and we have the app working. Then let's say we already do everything that we have here. We are just missing unit testing or widget testing. So let's create one widget test very fast. I will go to here, UI test. I will create a class that I will call, how can I call this, news screen test. And here I need the main. And if you remember before we use Mockito. Okay, we are going to still use Mockito or not. Okay, no, we in the Cubit test, we use Mockito to mock the repository. So that is one way that we can create a mock. Now I will show a different way to create a mock. So let's say I want to create I want to test this widget here. So I will create a different mock of the repository, but now I am not going to use Mockito. Now I'm going to create this class by myself, like my own mock repository. And this one extends repository. What's the name of news repository? And then we have an error here because we need to add the import. We need to do the override. So here, what we are going to do is I'm going to create two classes, two articles, and I'm going to return these two here, article 1 and article 2. So this needs to be a future, so I put here. Okay, now you can see this is my mock class, my mock repository. I didn't use Mockito. So in the setup over here, in the test, now I'm going to do the setup. I'm going to put here, this is like this. I am going to reset anything that is in GetIt. Also, I'm going to inject this mock repository. So here I will say I will inject a news repository that will be my own mock repository. So we know every time when we call top headlines, we are going to get these two articles. So there is no mistake when we are doing the test. Then in the widget test, it's like this. I am going to pass, and I'm going to test the top news class. So you can see I pass a material app and the home is top news. Then I call this amp 0. This has to be here. And then we want to test that we can find these two classes or those two texts. So I test that we find the widget with the text tutorial 1 and tutorial 2. Let's run this test and let's see if it's true. Okay, it's true. Let's say we remove this article from here. So this API only return one article. So when I run this test again, it should fail. Okay, we can see test fail. Why? Because we expect to find two widgets, but we only find this one. And okay, I go back. Okay, then that's it. We already finished all this presentation. Do anyone has a question? I haven't uploaded this yet to Git, but I will share later. I cannot hear. I think something wrong with my audio.
Let's finish.
Maybe they doesn't have battery. Hello? Yes, I
Hello?
can hear now. Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. 大家听得到我的声音吗？
Yes, 听得到。
OK，
我的中文还可以，还好一点，我会一点点。
那就谢谢你。抱歉，因为一开始那个麦克不好洗。
Okay, there is a question. Someone is asking if the block correspond to the domain layer. Okay, let me see. Give me 1 second. I will answer. It's because I think it depends. How do we look, or what are we doing in the block? For example, if I go to the Flutter block documentation, we can see they say the business logic will be in the block. So again, it really depends your solution. In my presentation, I follow this architecture. So I would say that in the block, we have the business logic. Also, we have the state of the widget. So there is two things happening at the same time. Okay, that's it. That's the answer.
还有问题吗？
Okay, can you get the source code in GitHub? Okay, let me see. Give me 1 second. I will share my GitHub. I will put the source code here. I didn't put yet, but there is another. Let me see. Okay, you can find many examples here. There is another using block architecture, exactly the same. So I will share this one first. But this one here is the same, but it's a little more complete, right? It has navigation. Today in this presentation, I didn't do navigation because then we will spend a lot of time. So I will put here the link. Okay, again, there is a question. Block covers view models and use case. I think if you are talking like view models, the way we use, for example, in Android native, yeah, more or less, yes, your answer is yes. That the answer is yes. We cover view models and use case. But remember, in Android, if you use Kotlin or Java, you don't need to maintain the state of the user interface. Yeah, that's it. Okay, if there is no more questions, I will stop my talking. Then I think Vincent can help. Okay.
好，谢谢雅佑，谢谢大家来参加。因为我们活动本来是8点要结束，现在已经8点。那我本来是要介绍他们台北的事情，问问看那个 GTG 台北有没有想要说明补充什么？对的。
Vincent，你没有要介绍吗？
又已经很晚了。
哦，好。那 我们很高兴，
但是你工作上
又来为我们讲解这次 Flutter， 那也很高兴跟 Flutter Taipei 一起合作。那今天活动就到此结束。那我们再次谢谢Yayo Arellano跟 Flutter Taipei Vincent， 谢谢。
Thank you, Yayo.
You're welcome.
Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye everyone.